Good morning, James. I wanted to talk to you today about Kering, the global luxury brand house that owns Gucci, Bottega Veneta and Saint Laurent. We've owned it in the portfolios for around a decade. When did it first actually come to our attention?
Well, I'm going to show my age in this one. In 1988, I went to the introduction of Pinot Industries to the French second market and listened to a presentation by Monsieur Pinot Senior at the time. He was the richest man in France already, I think, by that point, if not within the next few years. But he ran a timber yard. In 1995, equally, we bought into the first flotation of Gucci. By the years 2003 or so, because it was a gradual process, Pinot had converted itself first into PPR and eventually, as it came to be, into Kering, and owned Gucci and the other brands you were talking about. So the evolution of this has been very long term.
Obviously, the company owns a range of brands that have quite different styles and feels to them. How does the company manage that on an individual basis?
I think there has tended to be a great stress on having the right pairing of a creative director, the designer, and on working with them, effectively the chief executive of the different brand companies. And I think that has been particularly true in the extraordinary success that Gucci has had in the last couple of years, where there was a very interesting appointment as the new creative director, in that Pinot sat down with a whole series of candidates and came up with what was at the time thought to be a very oddball choice of a gentleman called Alessandro Michele, who simply obsessed about Gucci as a brand. He is somebody who would not dream of wanting a different job from this. This is his job in the world. But as he says, I don't do marketing. I just try and concentrate on making something beautiful and something in line with the heritage of Gucci. Then there is the surrounds of a machine which in a sense tries to keep quite far away from that design process. And I think that example is a classic of what's been done at each different brand to give them that sense of their own culture, their own identity, but at the same time to provide the mechanisms of effective, thoughtful capitalism to manage to magnify the outcomes in financial terms.
One of the astonishing achievements has been that these brands have become truly global in nature. How have they achieved that, and where might they go from here?
I think that the first point to make would be that in no way can these markets be treated in some hierarchical sense. As Kering will tell you, the desire for really acute fashion, and in many cases very expensive fashion, is every bit as evident in Shanghai or Beijing as it is in Florence rather than Milan in this case, or New York or London. I think there is actually a good argument for suggesting that China is both a very challenging market, but it's in some senses actually the key market. And it's noticeable that many of the individual brands that have struggled in recent years, such as Prada, for instance, have failed to navigate the shoals of changing Chinese and different geographies within China and different retail structures within China. But I would stress it's absolutely global too, because as you can imagine, your main outlets in Paris or Milan, they may be classed as European sales, but most of the time you're not selling to Europeans, so it's a lot more complex than simple geographic distribution might make you think. This is a company, in contrast, say, to a Burberry, which has always believed that the principal opportunity lies in converting brands with a small and erratic, but in some senses notorious or famous reputation, into a whole series of different opportunities. It's not a one brand company at all. And I think that opportunity to have many different brands and many different price points is a critical part of the success of Kering relative to many of its competitors.
James, perhaps we're all familiar in walking down the fashion streets in these cities and seeing the global flagship stores of these brands. But actually in today's world, we're all becoming more digital, and that provides a challenge for these companies. How are they addressing that?
Companies have to, again, stand back and think of what they're trying to do. And in many cases, the question's not really been about whether you are digital or non-digital in your means of distribution, but that most complicated question of all, I think, for these companies: how do you maintain the reality or the illusion of being a luxury company? And in some ways, I think I would reverse your question and suggest to you that many of the big traditional stores, where this appeared as a problem before dealing with the digital issue, if you were having to get a ticket and queue outside major outlets, for instance in Paris, then is that really a luxury experience? So I would put it that what they're trying to do in physical as well as digital is to try and make sure that people are getting a personalised service.
Given that the strength and longevity of these brands is exactly their competitive advantage, how long do you think we'll own the stock in the portfolio?
I tend to feel quite uncomfortable with the notion of setting a date, just as I feel uncomfortable with the notion of setting a price target. I don't think we're really doing our jobs unless the opportunities are open-ended. But if I try and meld that with competitive advantage, well, over the years, the most successful in financial terms, in stock market terms, luxury goods company by some distance has been Hermès. The opportunity is to try and turn your business not just into something that's a growing market that's got individual brands, but where its perceived longevity is extraordinary. Now, Gucci is coming up towards its 100th anniversary, and despite the many efforts over the years, it hasn't been destroyed. But I think by combining the brands, by managing them thoughtfully, intelligently, not maximizing short-term profits, you can turn this business into something very long-lasting.
Can I also touch on another luxury brand that we've held in the portfolio, that of Ferrari? It tends to, with being inside of Fiat, have been analysed as a car company, but in truth, Ferrari is a luxury brand, is it not?
Yes, absolutely. The question was, though, when we first bought Fiat, before Ferrari was split out, was could that jewel survive within that grouping? And I mean survive not just as to whether it was being managed properly, but could the whole company survive because it was close to bankruptcy? It was really that we've become convinced that the duo running Fiat overall and basically Ferrari as well could manage to extract that value, could manage to make the company survive. If that was going to be so, then the potential upside was enormous. And actually, I think at the initial stages, Catherine, I'd associate this more with our doctrine that it's probability adjusted upside rather than the certainty that it is all going to work out, or the absence of a possibility of losing quite a lot of money that was important to us. Now, since then, with Ferrari now trading as an independent entity and we've sold our rump holding in Fiat, we've got to a position where we're large owners of the company. We have a great relationship with the management team, who are very generous with their time. I think that what you're saying, this focus on Ferrari as a luxury brand, has become acutely true. There are simply many more wealthy people in many more countries of the world than there used to be. So the available market has gone up. At the same time, though, they managed to push the price up to a ridiculous level. This, as your guest, has really meant that they're not involved in the day-to-day traumas of the car market. They can even be relaxed about taking their time over deciding where electrification goes, and even more autonomous driving, because most people want to drive their Ferrari rather than anything else. In the case of electric, they know that there's a problem because electric doesn't make the noise that people want to hear with their Ferrari, but they've also got a lot of people offering them the opportunity to make electric Ferrari if they want in the future. So I think the dilemmas are completely different from a traditional car company, and I think they are much more immune to the problems of that industry.
So once again, this is enduring brand as a strong competitive advantage for the company.
Yeah, I mean, I would go a stage further. I think in the case of Ferrari, and perhaps the parallel here is the Gucci part of Kering, that these were brands that had proved how strong they were because they had been managed so appallingly badly. And the very fact that they had endured through that was proof that if you applied some, not just sensible, but I think in a genuine sense, an inspired management to these assets, that the opportunity set was a lot greater than people were willing to believe.
Thanks very much for your time, James. Whilst most people may not necessarily see Ferrari as just a luxury brand, it's been fascinating to tie that into the wider story about Kering and just how enduring a truly great brand can be. Thanks.